I'd like to welcome everybody here today. Thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see such a great turnout for this event. We have an engaging program for you this afternoon. We're going to start with a section of a documentary, which is footage from Gaza, and we also have 3 speakers. My name is Doug. I'm one of the members of the group of concerned residents of Prince Edward County who have organized this event. We're here today to discuss Canada's complicity with the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and more importantly, what you can do about it. The title of our event is Canada Complicit in a Genocide? 4 days ago, the UN concluded that what is unfolding in Gaza is a genocide. That is established. We're here to discuss Canada's complicity in that genocide. Before we actually begin our program, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are settlers living on Indigenous territories. And at this point, I'd like to call up Angela to do a land acknowledgement.
Good afternoon. Today, we acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Anishinaabe nations. We recognize and respect the inherent connection between Indigenous peoples, their cultures, languages, stories, and this land which they did not formally surrender. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. I'd also like to thank the Picton Library for hosting this event. It's important that events like this are hosted and supported in a community learning space. As some of you know, similar events were canceled at the Belleville Library earlier this year. So thank you to Picton Library for hosting an event that promotes human rights, critical thinking, and for resisting censorship. I'd also like to thank the organizations who have endorsed this event. Please check out their social media. We also have materials from them on our action table at the back. They also have other ways that you can get involved and take action. Those organizations are Belleville for Justice and Peace, Labour for Palestine Canada, the Coalition for the Prevention of Genocide in Gaza, Independent Jewish Voices, Quinte Group 111 of Amnesty International, and the Palestinian Youth Movement. Today is day 715 of the ongoing genocide in Gaza. What can we do? We have an action table with materials outlining some of the actions you can take, from BDS, which means boycott, sanction, divest, to sign petitions and to write your elected representatives and protesting. We have a concrete step that you can take today and is part of our call to action. We have a letter that we have written that you can put your name to, that'll go to our Member of Parliament, Chris Millett, urging Canada to end its supply of arms flowing to Israel, which are currently being used to commit genocide. We did invite Mr. Millett to come to today's event, but we did not hear back from him. We must end Canada's complicity in the suffering of the Palestinian people. We are asking that you sign and return that letter. You can drop it off at the desk. We have envelopes for you. Those envelopes do not require postage. When you're mailing your MP, no postage is necessary. You can mail it yourself or give it to us and we'll mail it. Now onto our program. So we're going to start with a bit of a part of a film. We're going to show a 20-minute section of a 2-hour film entitled From Ground Zero. We're showing 4 of the 22 shorts in this film. This film is available for download in a number of places if you want to watch the whole thing. It was shortlisted for an Oscar, and it's made entirely by Palestinian filmmakers. And you want to know why? We want to know how this ties into today's theme, Canada's complicity. We want to know the complicity in what. This film shows daily life in Gaza in 2024. Things have intensified since then, so it's a lot worse now than it was during this film. We want to let you know that there are no graphic depictions of violence or death, although it is ever present. Many of the filmmakers have lost family and friends. You will also notice the ever-present sound of drones, machines that both surveil and bring death as a form of terrorizing an occupied population. So we're just going to go with the film now. We are going to move on to the speaker portion of our program today. We wanted to let you know that we will be taking questions once all three speakers have had a chance to speak. And we will have volunteers, actually, Celeste and Kami over there. If you have a question, raise your hand. We will come over and write the question down. We have a very tight timeline for this event, and we want to respect our speakers' time. So we'll take those questions, then we'll ask them all at the end. Our first speaker, we're going to bring him up, and we'll get you set up, and then I'll introduce you. There's no audio users, right?
No.
Point this up soon. Videos.
Okay, let's see here. Is it?
You good to go?
Yeah. You don't need to put it there, by the way. Like, there's no need to project anything. Okay.
It's connected, so it'll just show. There, it's on screen, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's
Okay. Give you a quick introduction.
okay.
Set up.
And this we can move it up right a little bit.
There we go. Okay, our first speaker is Hassan Husseini. He's a union negotiator, community activist, and senior leader of Canada's Labour for Palestine initiative. He lives in Ottawa. Labour for Palestine is an organization of trade union members who stand in solidarity with the Palestinian workers and people. It conducts education and outreach about Canada's economic complicity in Israel's apartheid and promotes important cultural history of international solidarity in the workers' movement. Hassan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doug, and thanks to all the organizers who put this wonderful event on. It's really wonderful to see so many faces, great turnout on this beautiful, sunny Saturday afternoon. I speak to you, of course, as one of the activists with Labour for Palestine Canada, but also I speak from personal experience. That dates back to when I was a child. And on that personal note, I just came back from Lebanon a week ago, exactly. I had left, and we live in South Lebanon. And a year ago, South Lebanon was a war zone, one way of putting it, but also a target of the actions of the genocidal state of Israel against the people of Lebanon. And that continues. Hearing the drones that were projected in that series of films that we saw, that's what we constantly heard over the past 2 months when I was in Lebanon. Constantly, the sounds of drones are overhead, and I have so many videos on my phone of it, to the extent that every time we hear an airplane, we live in Ottawa near the airport, we turn around to see whether the drone is overhead, because when the drone comes, then the fighter jets will come after and they will be bombing. And in fact, a couple of weeks before leaving, so 3 weeks ago, we were coming back, my partner and I, from the beach, and the area we passed by, about 45 minutes after we passed by, was bombed. It was not a military target. It was not attacking any leaders of the Lebanese resistance movement. It was attacking a depot of construction equipment, because the target for the Israeli army right now in South Lebanon is to depopulate 17 villages on the border, with the goal to fully ethnically cleanse them. We know that Netanyahu talked about Greater Israel, and that is not lost on the people of those villages. I also grew up in Lebanon under Israeli occupation, and the Israelis, the Zionists, like to talk a lot about human shields. Of course, they say it in a very derogatory way, that Palestinians and Arabs don't love their children. I was used as a human shield as a child multiple times by the Israeli occupation army when I would go to school and come back from school. Every time they would make me walk with them and in front of them, and they would put me on their jeeps so that the resistance movement would not attack them. I was 11, 12, and 13 years old. So let that sink in, and remember that I'm speaking from all these experiences as well. Of course, I will be talking to you about 3 areas that I want to tackle today. Canada and Israel, Palestine, the history of complicity, because complicity in the occupation and the genocide is not new for Canada. What is labor for Palestine, and why is Palestine a labor issue? Very quickly. The history of complicity, of course, we need to start from the fact of recognizing that Canada, like Israel, is a settler colonial state. It was founded on the displacement and the genocide of the indigenous people. And that is a fact, and that is a reality. Even politicians in Canada, including Justin Trudeau, acknowledge that fact. Of course, they're not doing much about it, but nevertheless, it has been acknowledged. It is important to recognize and make a distinction, of course, between the Canadian state and the people of Canada, us as Canadians. And what we are increasingly seeing is a widening gap between the ruling class, whether it would be at the political, economic, media level, and average Canadians that are congregating here and right across the country. There is a huge shift that we are seeing, and I definitely know it from working within the labor movement. I've been an activist in the labor movement for over 30 years, and I can tell you there's a sea change in the labor movement as far as Palestine and Israel are concerned, recognition of the ugliness of what's happening. An Angus Reid poll that was commissioned on August 6th, just last month, you will see there, you can see it on screen, I'm not too small, but let me tell you that from November 23, going on to February 2024 to May 2024, and then August 2025, the question was about, where do your sympathies rest more, right? So if you look at November 2023, 28% of sympathies of Canadians were with the Israelis. It went down to 25% in February 2024. It stayed at 25% in May 2024, and now stands at 19%. Whereas sympathies with the Palestinians went up from 18% in November 2023 to 23% in February 2024 to 28% in May 2024 to now stands at 37%. The poll itself is very long, but I just wanted to give you a snippet of it, an example of the sea change that we are seeing across the country. And it is this sea change in particular that is scaring the hell out of Zionists and their apologists in Canada and across the world, for that matter. Let's talk about Canada's complicity. Of course, we have the popular myth about Canada being the country of peacekeepers. We're independent and sovereign in our foreign policy. We care and we fight and we support human rights around the world. That is definitely the way we like to think of ourselves, and that is not a bad thing to do. However, Canada has supported the Zionist colonization, the violent Zionist colonization of Palestine from the beginning, from 1947-48. As an example, how many of you are from the labor movement or are unionized members? By a show of hands, not too many, okay. You may be familiar with the name Rand, Ivan C. Rand, from the Rand formula in the labor movement, we call it, because Ivan C. Rand, before he was appointed to be the representative of Canada on the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, was a judge who ruled and came out with a ruling essentially that gave union recognition after a strike of the auto workers in Windsor. Right, and so the Rand formula is very known to workers because it gave workers in Canada the recognition and the right to organize. Ivan C. Rand was Canada's representative. He played a critical role in the drafting and the lobbying for United Nations Resolution 181 that partitioned Palestine at that time. He rejected the binationalism and rejected the federalism, which we were trying to build in Canada. He did this out of his commitment to the Zionist project, of course, and Israel honored him and Lester B. Pearson, who later became our prime minister, but at that time he was the Undersecretary of State for Canada, and they named the Zionists in Israel after its establishment, named Lester B. Pearson as the Balfour of Canada in recognition of his role of facilitating the establishment of the State of Israel. Of course, folks may be familiar with the Balfour Declaration, of the British Balfour Declaration that facilitated the beginning of the colonization of Palestine after World War I. And so we were recognized as playing as important role in the establishment of the Zionist state. If you review the writing and speeches of Ivan Rand during this period, you will easily see the racist colonialist ethos and narrative that he espoused and he worked out of when discussing his role, which was not unlike that used to describe the settler colonial project here in Canada, to civilize the indigenous people on Turtle Island. That's exactly what they said about the Palestinians. In the words of Rand himself, and I quote, "Because Israel placed such importance on the value of individual freedom, the new state was proving a beacon light in an otherwise darkened section of humanity. Israel was also an anchorage in the Middle East for ethical values and civilizing influence of the West." Doesn't that resonate with what we did to indigenous people in this country? But that's Canada's legacy as far as Israel is concerned. Canada's position on Palestine over the years, of course, went through ebbs and flows, but never, and I would say perhaps the Chrétien period was one of the most nuanced in terms of votes at the United Nations and not supporting officially the Iraq war. But Canada's position never really deviated from the American, British, European position of protecting the State of Israel like one of our own. The left, and I consider myself out of the left political spectrum, and anti-colonial forces, we've always maintained that Israel is a beachhead of imperialism in the Middle East and in West Asia region. This was proven, I would say, without a shadow of the doubt over the past 2 years of the genocide against the Palestinian people. We only need to look at the facts of how Western imperialist states provided full military, diplomatic, financial, and economic support for the Zionist state, while the latter engaged in horrific and unspeakable crimes against the Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, as well as Lebanon. And of course, their intransigence and bombing campaigns, it has not been restricted to these three areas only, and has spread across the Middle East, the latest being, of course, Qatar. Joe Biden, the former president of the United States in 1986, said and repeated in 2023 when he was meeting Israeli president, that if there were not an Israel, we, the United States, would have to invent one to protect her, that is, United States interest in the region. That shows you the connection. That shows you how Israel is a beachhead and a front for the Western capitalist imperialist world. In late 2023, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. stated that Israel serves as the United States beachhead in the Middle East to make the point that Israel is a crucial ally to American interest in the region. And of course, we're talking about Democrats here. We haven't even started talking about the Republicans, right? All this to say that in their own words, there is a recognition by the ruling classes within the United States, the #1 imperialist country in the world, that Israel is their beachhead, that Israel is there to protect their interests and the interests of the system and the empire. As for Canada being a junior partner to US imperialism, sorry, hope I'm not bursting any bubbles. We're not as sovereign as we would like to think we are, unfortunately, especially on international issues. It means that we've aligned ourselves with the United States in terms of support for the Zionist project from the beginning of colonization. It may sound contradictory, but officially Canada recognizes that Israel is in violation of international law, and its occupation of the Arab territories that were occupied in '67 are illegal. Notwithstanding this, official position of Canada remain deeply complicit in the ongoing genocide, of course, in the illegal occupation, in the settler colonization, the settler violence, the ethnic cleansing, and the apartheid system. Since we're talking about complicity and genocide in this particular context, let me briefly just remind us. 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide states in Article 2 that in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part, because I know a lot of Zionists say, if we were committing genocide, we would have wiped them all out. Well, sorry, the Convention on Genocide doesn't say completely. And there's still indigenous people in this country. We are on indigenous land, and they hopefully will continue to thrive, right? So we did not eliminate them, despite the best efforts of those colonialists in Canada who tried to eliminate them. So it is in whole or in part the process on the attempt to eliminate national, ethnical, racial, or religious groups, such as killing members of the group, it's happening, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, it's happening, and deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. It is happening, the starvation being one example. The imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group. Those who are giving birth in Palestine now, they are seeing increasing deformities because of the weapons that are being used. And finally, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group, which happened in the past in Palestine. Article 3 talks about the following acts shall be punishable: genocide, B, conspiracy to commit genocide, C, direct and public incitement to commit genocide, D, attempt to commit genocide, and E, and I highlighted it in yellow, complicity in genocide. What does that mean? Providing financial, military aid, weapons, diplomatic cover, or other resources to a state or a group known to be committing genocide, and nobody can deny that unless there's something wrong with you, knowing that these resources will be used to facilitate the genocide is considered complicity, and that is exactly what Canada has done over the past 2 years. This is over the past 2 years of the active, of course, part of the genocide, because the genocide against the Palestinian people did not start 2 years ago. It is a slow rolling genocide that got us to this point. So the four main areas of Canadian state complicity. One is arms sales. And if you look at some of the figures here, you will see in 2022 alone, there were 315 permits, $21.5 million of weapons to Israel. All kinds of weapons, from drones, radars, surveillance systems, and so on. It's a two-way relationship, not one way. That's why we always call for a two-way arms embargo. 3, there's police and law enforcement cooperation agreements between Canada and Israel. And the Trudeau government authorized $28.5 million of new permits in the first 2 months of the active genocide alone, right? I would also draw to your attention that on July 29, 2025, the Arms Embargo Now Coalition, which we are members of, a report came out exposing Canadian military exports to Israel, which showed that Canada continues to supply arms and weapons to Israel, despite their public pronouncements that after the March 2024 motion in Parliament that they will not issue new permits, they continued to. So they were lying to Canadians. And the report actually shows very disturbing trends in relation to weapon sales to Israel. That's why part of the action you'll see today to support the bill before Parliament, the private members' bill, to close those loopholes, because one of the biggest loopholes is to send equipment through the United States that goes to Israel. Two, of course, we have charities. Jewish National Fund and the Hesed Foundation are two examples of those charities that channel money to Israel, which is in violation, of course, of the Canada Revenue Agency Act, and in the case of Hesed, it is a charity supposedly to provide support for foreign soldiers, for IDF, so-called IDF soldiers in the Israeli army who are from Canada, which is, of course, a violation of the Foreign Enlistment Act. These charities are being scrutinized right now. And in fact, the JNF lost its charitable status. But right now, the latest information I heard, they're coming back under the Friends of the JNF. The JNF money from Canada went to build a Canada Park and in the West Bank. And the Canada Park is built on the ruins of 4 destroyed Palestinian villages. Look it up. It's called Canada Park. C, trade agreements, $2 billion in 2020. In trade agreements between trade in merchandise and services between Canada and Israel. And I don't have figures for over the past 2 or 3 years, but we know that this not only has continued, but there are indications that it has increased. And of course, diplomatic. On the diplomatic side, Canada's record since 2011 at least, and even before, is that they voted every single time, either abstained or supported the United States and a handful of other countries in blocking any motions that condemned the Israeli state for its violations of international law and international humanitarian law. And Canada, of course, in addition to abstaining, lately has talked about a ceasefire coming late to it. After other countries and other groups have started talking about ceasefire and the need for a ceasefire. Canada, its position came in late. And the current calls for a ceasefire, in my opinion, are disingenuous, and they're predicated on the Palestinian resistance movement actually disarming itself and playing no role in the future of governance of demilitarized Palestinian state. Carney certainly is following on the footsteps of other Canadian leaders in terms of their position with respect to Israel and continuing the cover for Israel in the United Nations. These 4 examples, and there are others, makes us deeply complicit because we are not just being silent, we are actively aiding and abetting the state of Israel in the acts of genocide that they've been engaged in actively for the past 2 years. I will leave talking about Labor for Palestine as an organization. We have material at the front, at the back, that you can take a look at and see what we are doing, except for one campaign that we're engaging in right now. It's called the Hot Cargo Kills, No Labor for Genocide. Hot cargo is an old term that is used in the labor movement, and essentially it calls on workers of conscience not to touch, not to produce, not to transport any material that makes them complicit in genocide, in human rights violations, or supporting companies that mistreat workers. And workers across the country are taking up the campaign greatly, and this is a concrete way for us to answer the call of Palestinian civil society, trade unions, to put pressure on the state of Israel, and of course to put pressure on our state, the Canadian state, to stop its complicity, and on the state of Israel, of course, to abide by international law. The call, I'm sure you know it, came out in 2005, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions call. And this is one concrete way that we as workers, that we as trade unionists can support the people in Palestine to seek their dignity, their freedom, and their liberation. And as Nelson Mandela said, we are not free until the Palestinians are free. Free Palestine.
Thank you, Hassan. We're just going to get set up for our next speaker who's joining us via Zoom. If you do have any questions, please raise your hand and our volunteers will come around to take those questions down. Just going to share the screen. So our next speaker is Adam Diabas. From having been born in a two-Kalram refugee camp in Palestine and being raised between its tight alleys, witnessing the Second Intifada and surviving through its hardships, to growing into the role of an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement Toronto, his commitment to Palestinian liberation will never waver. Adam, just let me know when you want me to share the screen.
Okay, yes, I'm ready.
Okay, hang on one second. We're just going to get you on our screen here. Okay. Okay, we have you on screen. Go ahead and when you are ready for me to share the screen, let me know. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you to all the organizers for giving me the chance to speak, for organizing this amazing event. I'm so saddened I couldn't make it there in person. There are a lot of events happening for Palestine. There's also the Draw the Line rally today that's actually unifying movements from across the board. And yeah, so it's a very busy time, and Picton is a very long way from the GTA. So sorry I wasn't able to make it in person, and thank you for the opportunity. Can we start sharing?
One sec. Okay, first slide is up.
Okay, so a little bit about myself. My name is Adham Diabas. I was born and raised in the West Bank, in a refugee camp called Tulkarim. I spent my entire childhood there up until high school, where I moved to Canada. And basically, my family had escaped the Second Intifada. My dad had been incarcerated and basically kidnapped for many years in Israeli prisons. Many other members of my family, uncles, aunts as well. A few family members that were also martyred around that time. So it was really it was a really difficult time for us, and we decided to go to Canada. Ever since then, I've been, trying to make my way through adjusting to this imperial core and the capitalist system that we exist in. I've been organizing with PYM for about 4 years now. Next slide, please. Doug, can you share your screen with me? So I could tell which slide you're on?
Yep. There we go. You see that?
I don't see those. Yes, there we go. Okay. So very quickly about the PYM. For those of you who don't know, PYM is an international grassroots independent political movement of Palestinian Arab youth fighting for the liberation of our homelands from Zionism and imperialism. The PYM holds the right of the Palestinian people to resist colonial domination by any means necessary. And we also reject the framing that reduces us to victims of colonial violence alone. Historically and today, the diaspora has played a pivotal role in the popular mobilizations to advance the struggle in Palestine. And the PYM believes that our role is to mobilize and, more importantly, to organize our communities and anyone who supports the struggle of the oppressed for liberation, to confront Zionism wherever we are. Next slide, please. And the way I wanted to do this presentation today is in three main segments. And just very briefly, like it's very important that we build the conviction and the historical knowledge that is gonna enable us to stand up and rise up against a genocide and live up to the duty that we have as human beings to call out injustice anywhere. In a time where the battle of narratives, the battle of ideas, people who control the media are losing this war. It's important that we have the correct knowledge and background of information. So I don't want this to turn into any type of like lecture or history, but just very briefly, I will go through some key turning points and historical context, and then we'll move on to the just current reality and material conditions of the people that are in the West Bank, in Gaza, so we understand what people, Palestinians in the ground, are facing in those two areas right now, and then we'll move on to Canadian complicity and our role to end it. Next slide, please. So these I picked these turning points, key turning points, as a way to solidify the knowledge, and as a way, as like basically as a starting point to supplement us with the knowledge that's necessary for us to continue on this path of advocacy and continue on this path of calling Canadian complicity. And I'm not going to run through all of them or go in depth. The only one that I'll cover in one slide is the Nakba 1948, which I'm sure all of you are aware of. But just to give a brief summary of those key moments. So starting off with the British mandate for Palestine, where the Britain colonized historical Palestine after defeating the Ottomans, setting really that's the like initial point where the stage was set for increased Jewish immigration and pushing out the Arab population, moving on to the Great Revolt or the Great Arab Revolt or the Great Palestinian Revolt, as some people might like to call it. Palestinians rose against British rule and Zionist Jewish settlers, signaling a widespread resistance and the formation of Palestinian armed groups. And moving on, sorry, I'm just getting a call. And the next is 1948, the creation of Israel, and that which led to the mass Palestinian displacement, really like reshaping the region's demographic. And we will go in detail a bit more after the slide. And moving on to Nakba, where Israel's victory in the Six-Day War resulted in the occupation of Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Syrian Golden Heights, as well as the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula. There's also the First Intifada, which is, it really marked the Palestinian grassroots uprising against occupation, and really brought the international attention and legitimacy to the Palestinian struggle. That kind of paved the way to the Oslo Accords and later on the Second Intifada. Next slide, please. So I'm sure many of you have seen this map before, and just like very quickly, I'm sure all of you are familiar with what Nakba means and what it entails, but just kind of like really like a rebrush on that information. The Nakba was, the moment where the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians really started, and it was initiated through violent displacement, dispossession of their land, of property and belongings, along with the destruction of the Palestinian society as a whole, and the suppression of culture and identity and political rights, and national aspirations. Like Palestine was never allowed to gain its status as a country back then, because the stage was being set for the Zionist entity to be created from Mandate Palestine up until the Nakba. More than 800,000 Palestinians were displaced. Over 1,300 villages were completely destroyed or partially destroyed. 70 massacres against more than 70 massacres. Those are the ones that are just accounted for. The death toll was about like 15,000, although those numbers vary. And I think what's like really interesting about that period is when the UN partition plan came a few months before the inception of Israel, the Jewish population made about 30% of the total population of historic Palestine. And just to take a step back, when the Mandate of Palestine was first established in 1917, the Jewish population in historical Palestine was about 11%. And fast forward in 20 years up until the inception of Israel, there was about a 20 to 25% increase. And that really that figure really like highlights the amount and the way the magnitude of Jewish immigration to Palestine, but more importantly, the military backing of the British colonial forces for that immigration, and basically, um, I don't want to say helping, but basically forcing out the Arab population by different ways, the Palestinian population by different many ways. And when the UN partition plan came, the Jewish population made 30%, but they were given 56% of the land, as you could see in the second map. And that plan was utterly rejected by the Arab nations. It was utterly rejected by the Palestinian people. And from the beginning, it was an unfair agreement to give the Jewish minority population the majority of the land in historical Palestine. And what that moment truly represented is not a historical event, not only a historical event, but an ongoing reality, as it really laid the foundation for continued colonization and occupation of Palestinian land and violent dispossession of the Palestinian people. Next slide, please. And just to really understand, like this is a good segue for us to move on from 1948, the Nakba, and then current day Palestinians that live in Gaza that have endured this genocide for the past 23 months. The vast majority, about 70% of Gaza's population, are actually not from Gaza. They are descendants of people who were displaced in 1948 Nakba. You're talking about 1.7 million out of the 2.1 million that currently live in Gaza who are refugees. All of these dots on the first map, they represent all of the villages that they were actually displaced from. And as you could tell, they were displaced from all over Palestine. And this like displacement of destroying villages to 1948 and systematically pushing people out to the West Bank and Gaza represents the colonial domination and the Zionist settler movement of today and what it really represents, right? And the population living in Gaza lives in 8 different refugee camps, and Gaza is the most densely populated area in the world. And a lot of people tried, a lot of Zionists try to use this point of like, oh, like people in Gaza are having babies like crazy. Oh, like how could there be a blockade for 17 years when Gaza's population has jumped from this number to this number? And they often leave out the fact that 70% of those people are actually not from Gaza. So that's something for us to really like reckon with and sit down with and understand that things do not happen in a vacuum. October 7th did not happen in a vacuum. There's a long history that led up to that point, and what the Western media and what the Zionists would like you to believe is history started on October 7th, and this is, everything is happening out of a vacuum, which we know is not true. So I really wanted to give some perspective into the population of Gaza right now. But next slide. So, um, I don't like to really run through the numbers of the death toll because, I think we've gotten to a point where numbers are just that, right? Like we, we there has been an unfathomable amount of deaths, and these numbers are not accurate. There's tens of thousands of people still under the rubble. There's a few thousand people that are missing. So I don't want to really like through the numbers that are up on the screen, and you could see all of it. What's really like I think important to signify is the fact that the 40 to 50% of the death toll is children, and we're talking about more than 25,000 kids, and that number is higher than any other conflict that happened in the 20th century. And that shows us that this is not a war on any group or militant organization. This is a war on kids, right? This is on a war on Palestinian livelihood. This is a war on, this is essentially um, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians through the eradication of offsprings, right? And exists as in a never-ending cycle of perpetuated genocide and perpetuated killing. Mass displacement and shuttle grabs, so hundreds of thousands of Gaza are without homes, forced into crowded tents and destroyed schools. Famine is widespread, water and medicine shortages. 2 million Palestinians are in Gaza, are suffering from unprecedented conditions of man-made famine, unsafe drinking water, and critical shortages of medicine and medical supplies. Um, Almost every single hospital in Gaza has been bombed. 19 of them remain operational with very, very limited capacity as no fuel has been let in. And to say the least, the effects on children and a civilian is we will not like this is intergenerational trauma that we won't really be able to understand or comprehend until years down the line. Next slide, please. So right now, Palestinians in Gaza are being squeezed into a tiny corner with no safe passage, with no adequate aid access, and with ongoing bombardment, creating conditions of mass displacement and starvation and isolation. There are, I think, four main components in this invasion that's being carried out in the city of Gaza right now. And through those four main points, they are able to control, push out, and basically humiliate the Palestinian population in Gaza. The first one is massive displacement zone. As you could see in the map, 86% of Gaza is now either a no-go area or under forced evacuation orders. Many of these people have refused to leave, so they actually started, bombing high-rise towers, and they started actually, sending in quadcopters that instead of like dropping like a bomb on a building and killing everyone that's in it, they will send a quadcopter that actually goes inside the building and either like drops hand grenades or actually starts shooting people. And this is not just an intimidation. Intimidation is a very like minor way to describe it, but this is a way to really instill fear and to be like, okay, like if you refuse to leave, if you are not afraid of the bombing, we are going to send a machine into your house to kill you while you're sleeping, which is another form of, ethnic cleansing that takes a different type of toll on individuals. You could see in the Israeli military control quarters, let's see in red, you can see the extreme quarter, and it's cutting off central Gaza. It's splitting the strip and it's blocking free movement from either side. And it overlaps with the forced evacuation areas. And what you're really seeing is the entire population being pushed out towards the GHF aid distribution points in Rafah. And the reason for that is, like my brother Hassan mentioned, Netanyahu has come up in the UN and showed the map of Greater Israel, which is practically 2/3 of Syria, the Sinai Desert in Egypt and parts of Jordan. And what they're effectively trying to do, and what this map represents, is the systematic targeting and ethnic cleansing of people to push them out of Gaza. Like that is the goal that has been talked about for a long time now and has been, openly spoken about. In plain terms, like Palestinians are being squeezed into a tiny corner, and this is just part of the bigger plan of achieving the goal of Greater Israel. Next slide, please. Just to move a little bit away from Gaza to understand, so in Gaza, like past 1976, we have Palestinians being forced into the West Bank and into Gaza. And in Gaza right now, currently, we are seeing the most we're seeing like like the highest level of colonial domination and basically let's call it political violence against Palestinians being carried out, but in the West Bank it's being done in a different way, right? And the first map it represents, there's two things for us to understand. Number one is the sharp rise in settlements in the 1970s up until the 1990s. Right? And you could see the numbers of settlers growing by the 100,000s every other year. And like those settlements have grown into a massive network of Jewish-only communities on occupied Palestinian land. And what essentially the goal of that is to fragment the West Bank, isolating East Jerusalem and violating international law, while steadily eroding the possibility of Palestinian sovereignty. And this is why when European countries and a country like Canada moves to recognize Palestinian statehood in the UN, it's utterly meaningless. It's utterly pointless, and it makes no difference on the material conditions of the Palestinians on the ground. Palestinians are living under military rule, while settlers are governed by Israeli civil law, creating a dual system of control, or as we like to call it, apartheid. More than 680,000 settlers live in an over 250 illegal settlements that continue to expand, seizing land and breaking up Palestinian territory. Movement is tightly restricted by hundreds of checkpoints, roadblocks, and settler-only roads. Palestinians are not allowed on certain roads, while if you are of a Jewish faith, you are allowed to be on those roads or allowed to be in those areas. And those settler-only roads are basically cutting off Palestinians from Jerusalem and even neighboring town. Daily realities include land confiscation, home demolitions, military raids, mass arrests, including children, and the widespread of kidnapping of Palestinians as political prisoners in Israeli jails. And because they are tried in martial court and not under civil law, because they're not considered citizens of Israel, they are an occupied population under the control of Israel. They are often held for years under something called administrative detention. Without a charge or trial, they can be held for years on ends. And the rise in settler violence and the state-backed repression further entrenches this position and deny Palestinian basic rights. What we see on the map to the right is a new plan that was presented by the Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich that illustrates the remaining parts of the West Bank, highlighted in yellow. And it basically reflects his plan to fully annex the West Bank to Israel. Netanyahu officially approved a settlement last week. It's called the E1 settlement. And you could see it referenced in the map on the left. It's the highlighted red area right in the middle. And their intention is to start with the E1 plan and then move on to greenlighting other settlements just like it. And together, all of these plans would end the West Bank as a geographical mark for Palestinians, And most importantly, it would end any hopes or dreams or aspirations for a Palestinian sovereignty and any representation for a political entity. Next slide, please.
The answer is yes.
Okay, I was just told I'm at time. I'm speaking pretty slow. Okay, I'll finish up quickly, I promise. Okay, so is Canada complicit in a genocide? Yes, it is. Next slide. I think we can go into how it's complicit, but as my brother Hassan mentioned, I'll go into it a little bit, but Canada is yes complicit. I think, in my opinion, there are four main points. Number one is like the constant for Israel voting at the UN. This like 4 points. Number one is diplomatic and political complicity. This has Canada has repeatedly opposed or abstained from resolutions condemning Israeli settlements. They have failed to enforce international law. They have, blocked accountability by refusing to support the ICC and the ICJ. And they've also given us this one-sided rhetoric around self-defense, and demilitarized Palestinian state while minimizing or growing Palestinian rights. There is the armed trades and security complicity, which I'll go into a little bit in the next slide, but it consists of like the arms trade, the military cooperation, and still not enacting a two-way arms embargo. The third point is economic and corporate complicity. So Canadian companies are complicit in settlements. Many of our pension funds, like the Canadian pension funds and union funds, are actually invested in Israeli weapon manufacturers or settlement-linked firms. We have, long history of trade agreements like the Canada Free Trade Deal, which includes goods and produce and illegal settlements, effectively normalizing occupation. And the last one is domestic policy and repression. There's been over 150 protesters brutalized and arrested just for speaking up for Palestine. Canada has taken an anti-PDS stance, and they've, silenced refugees from in the diaspora. Next slide, please. So again, Canada is complicit. Canada is not neutral, and it is arming Israel. There has been over 470 direct military shipments with shipping records from Canadian weapon manufacturers directly to Israeli companies. We're talking about over 400,000 bullets that were sent to Israel over the past 2 years. We're talking about nearly 400 shipments of military equipment, bullets, weapon parts, rocket components, F-35 parts. And all of these have, played a huge role, not as big as the US, obviously, because everyone likes to compare to the US, but have played a huge role in fueling the genocide and making weapons for genocide in our own backyards. If you have not heard of the report, I urge you to scan the QR code and go through the report. It's about 47-page report that documents all of these shipments, all these weapon manufacturers, and it uses Israel Tax Authority data to basically backtrack these shipments. Next slide, please. I just want to reference those two quick articles. If you haven't seen them, please make sure to check them out. They highlight Canadian complicity. The first one goes to the arms trade and how the government has been lying to us for the past 22 months. And the second one talks about subsidizing the occupation, and Hassan touched on it briefly, and the charitable organizations that actually donate to Israeli occupation. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my last slide, so I'm just going to spend a few minutes on it. There's an idea of diversity of tactics when facing the genocide and facing the occupation and advocating for Palestinian rights. There is no one right way to do it. There are multiple ways to do it. And we have to basically utilize every tactic at our disposal to bring the Zionist entity down and to advocate for Palestinian human rights. These are just, for the sake of time, I'm not gonna go through all of them, but political pressure is, I think, the biggest thing through pressuring the government to end arms sales, through pushing for sanctions like we did in South Africa, accountability by the ICC and the ICG, challenging foreign policy bias. Those are very, very big things that we have to do. And I think the other one I'll touch on very briefly is the grassroots and social movements. This is practically what you guys, the kind of environment that you guys are in right now. And, it can consist of many tools. The number one tool that we've utilized as a Palestine movement is the mass mobilizations, so protests, direct actions, strikes, and solidarity campaigns to really shift public opinion by spreading awareness and making the political cost too heavy to keep up. There's also academic and cultural boycotts, coalition buildings, like we saw with the arms embargo report. And I think finally, just the media narrative shift. I'm not gonna focus on it too much, and I've gone over time a lot, so I'll finish here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. We are going to move on to our next speaker. We'll just get set up for that. In this period, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. We will have our volunteers come around to ask those questions. Adam will be available later to answer those questions too.
You're on mute. Adam, can you?
I'm on, no, this one's still on. That was my phone.
So I'm going to suggest, as I'm the next speaker and I have the power to make a suggestion, is that you just stand up if you want to and just breathe. There's so much stuff, so much information going into the room. Why don't you just do whatever you need to do to sort of center yourself? I'm going somewhere different. Just so, but if I were you, I'd stand up. I'm trying to stand up myself. Sorry. Sorry, let me just get.
No, it's okay. Take your time.
Okay.
Okay, our next speaker is Laura Skye. She's an award-winning documentary filmmaker who places social issues, including human rights and advocacy, at the center of her work. The founder of Skyworks Charitable Foundation, Laura's artistry and passionate engagement with communities have attracted international honors, as well as loyal audiences at home and abroad. Her work as a teacher, mentor, guide, and writer puts her in the front line of advocates and artists who are committed to social change.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going something very different. Can you hear me? Okay. It's a lot of information, eh? Just push into our brains. It's all very important. It's historical and motivates us some of us to do what we're doing now. In a way, you're the right group to talk to and you're the wrong group to talk to. I'll tell you what I mean. The big question that I wanted to bring to us today is whether and how we internalize complicity. Like, we talk usually about complicity with, governments and corporations doing bad stuff that benefits them and also causes terrible harm, genocide, in this case to the people of Palestine. That's how we see complicity. But let's take another framework. And I'm going to encourage you, this isn't sort of an opportunity for Q&A, but just afterwards, perhaps if you have thoughts or feelings about this, maybe you could contribute them. There's no such thing as a silly intervention, because I'm hoping to talk with you. I think our key challenge from my perspective, and I assume maybe incorrectly that it's from the Picton group's perspective, is to understand what actions we can take, what collective actions we can take in our local communities, given that we live in small communities, in terms of addressing the profound injustice and the genocide of the Palestinian people perpetrated by the State of Israel. So the big challenge is, how do we do this? And I think one of the biggest barriers from my own experience in terms of mobilizing around this issue, I think one of the biggest barriers is what I call internalized complicity. I think that there are barriers that make it really hard and frightening for some people to engage. Now, in a way, you're the wrong audience because you're here, right? And you've been on the street, I think some of you have been on the street. But the question is, how do we address these, what I call internal complicity realities to the people we know, to build the movement, to make our group larger, to be noisier, to be, in a sense, more effective? How can we reach people through the way that they're internally complicit? And then I began to ask myself, what is it that makes us potentially, or makes them? I'm not sure if it's an us or them, because I've had layers of this myself that motivates us, or what that creates the barrier, or the barriers of what I call internal complicity. Well, I'm sure you'll have ideas out of this. I'm just going to give you some of my ideas. One of the layers of internalized complicity, I think, is what I call collusion. Now, it's not bad, evil collusion. It's not like, oh, they're evil, they think bad things. But the collusion allows people to believe the dominant narrative. Like, well, the Palestinians elected Hamas, so what do they expect? Or Hamas uses people as human shields. Or we bombed the hospital, and we bombed the hospital, and we bombed the hospital, and we bombed the school, and we bombed the university because Hamas was hiding underground. So in a way, that becomes the dominant framework, and that we can become, not you and me, but people can become attached to that collusion because it helps them understand things that are completely ununderstandable on some level. It helps them find a way to navigate their way through unbearable murder, torture, starvation. So in the face of that painful, agonizing collusion, and it becomes, in a way, our pain, as opposed to the Palestinian pain, which is a whole weird place to go to anyhow, but how we try to understand this. One of the ways is by accepting those lies or accepting those frameworks. Another is, and I've thought a lot about this for many years, the way we detach. This is so horrible. It's so inhuman. I can't attach myself to seeing it, to understanding it, to feeling it. So in a way, collectively, we become numb. It's a trauma. And it's not even, I mean, in a completely contradictory fashion, it becomes our trauma, but it's the trauma of a people so far away, and we see it every day. And I think that that also supports us to become complicit, because it's too painful. What are we going to do about it? We can't bear it. Close the television. But I think the other layer, or not another layer, of this internalized complicity is what I call confusion, and I mentioned it before. How do we know what to believe? Like, I can't bear listening to, frankly, I'm going to reveal my politics, Carney saying what he's going to do while Canada is so incredibly complicit in providing arms and supporting. So I have to go to a really weird place. Like, it's a way of hearing what you know are lies. You know it in your heart that these are lies. You know in your heart that this is misinformation. But what can you do about it in your head? How do we manage this confusion? Well, we say it's too much, or here's the worst one, it's too complicated. And in saying that, or thinking that, or feeling that, we struggle with becoming complicit. There's another layer. Mustafa, who you'll see with the camera, right in the corner, and we just did a film that really, it's the smallest, biggest film I've ever done. And it's a film working with Jewish people like myself who've become activists. And what that has meant, what that choice has meant in terms of our personal lives, our family lives, our collective lives, and our yearning to participate in justice and to end the genocide. The film explores our experiences of that. But one of the things that I discovered, and I don't know what to make of this, is that fear. So I'm a Jewish woman. I've been a Jewish woman my whole adult life. I'm a secular Jewish woman. I don't go to synagogue. I don't, sorry, but it doesn't offend people. I don't believe in God. I wish I believed in God, but I don't. It's what I saw was Jewish people afraid of Jewish people. Because for whoever spoke in the film, there were people who would not. They weren't afraid of, God forbid, being bombed. They weren't afraid of being physically harmed. They were afraid of being ostracized, disconnected, losing the love of their families, losing the attachment to their community. And I saw this drives them to what I think, and I don't mean to sound patronizing about this, it drives them, and sometimes it has to be in us, because I'm a Jewish woman, into a form of internalized complicity, because we are afraid of the losses if we take those positions. It's not only Jewish people. We did a screening, an incredible screening in Belleville. When we finished the film, it was the first time, 40 people in the room. And there was a man from Lebanon who said he's really tortured. I mean, psychologically, politically, I don't mean, because in his own community, there are people who are afraid to speak out, like people who are Lebanese. So it's not just Jewish people. And on some level, like whenever people say, so what are you doing now? I ask them, I say, I don't know how you feel about this issue, but because we've been in opposition, we've been oppositional, we take the risks. And we experience the same fears of loss of community, of loss of attachment, of loss of connection. And that can make us, at times, internally complicit. It's what I call the fear of retribution and alienation that prevents many people from speaking out. So that happened to me. I got to tell you this. You can imagine, I don't often get afraid of speaking out. I'm pretty noisy. But I had an experience recently. My walker speaks to it. I was in a rehab unit, and I was doing my daily walking in the corridor, because that's what you do when you try and get better. And there was this much older woman also practicing. We began to talk to each other, and just easily, And finally, she asked me the question, you've been a filmmaker, what are you doing? I said, I don't know how you feel about this issue. Well, it turns out she's a Holocaust survivor. She was 4 years old when she was freed from a concentration camp. Her father died. Her mother died months later. She was an orphan by 4. And you know what? I didn't know how to talk to her about this issue, because I didn't know how to go to that place, in a way risking re-traumatizing her. But how could I claim any experience over her own? So I minimized it. Well, she took the major narratives, that Hamas uses people as human shields, the usual blaming Hamas, the Hamas are the monsters. But she said this, here's the space. She said this, she said, I don't know how to think about this. Well, that was an amazing space for her to create in this conversation. And then she said, I don't know what to think. And then her struggle was so honest. And I thought, these are the people we need to speak with, because they also inform our internal complicity. I'm going to add one more thing that may be a little bit shocking. I'm trying to work it out myself. When people talk about Zionists, I get it. I've been an anti-Zionist person since my first political moments when I was a teenager. It just made sense to me to be anti-Zionist. My parents were longtime trade unionists and socialists. Our dinner table conversation was always, well, we talked about gossip and we were lucky about my grandmother's experience working in the factory, but political debate was big. And sometimes family members would come to have dinner with us. I remember a family member coming in a uniform. He just got out of the Canadian Army. He was going to Israel because he was a labor Zionist. And what they believed in is something that I believe in and I don't believe in. They believed that, in fact, Israel was going to be the opportunity to create a socialist dream. And the justice and the human rights that would come with that dream. They didn't know about colonialism. They didn't think about imperialism. They thought about what they wanted in their lifetimes for themselves and for their children. Hard to argue it. It was hard to argue because I didn't have an alternative framework. So for a lot of, when I hear the word Zionist, sometimes I get very uncomfortable. I'll tell you why. Because I think it's a coded word for Jewish people. But you must know that there is huge diversity in the Jewish community about this. Huge. And on every single level. On the worst level, when in Belleville, we've had counter demonstrators, including a brief experience with the Jewish Defense League, which is a terrible group, which is it's been labeled a terrorist group, and they've been responsible for murders in the States. They're not nice. But we've also been confronted by I think, people from the local synagogue with the Israeli flags, right? There they are, there we are. And my dear sweet husband, who's a very thoughtful person, decided that he was going to go over to the Jewish group and have a conversation. So he walked over and he said, "I'd like to talk to you." And they said, "Fuck off." So that was a surprise. But we want to talk. Sometimes we want to talk. We want to break through the layers of what can become complicity. So when I hear Zionism, I'm asking you to think that in the Jewish community, there are very brave people taking on these issues of rejection, of marginalization, of isolation, of punishment. We're here, and there are thousands of us. So please think about this in a different way, and that Zionism came from good places and terrible places, and right now is being enacted in a completely genocidal fashion. Okay, just let me take my notes. Yeah, but my husband thinks that's enough. He's usually a good judge of this. Just let me tell you one more thing and then I will stop. I always say that and I never stop. At that dinner table, we were secular, as I say. We didn't have any affiliation with the institutions of Judaism, but we were Jewish. And at my dinner table, some of the people here already know I've referred to this, I realized that there was an 11th commandment. And the commandment is that if you see evil, if you see injustice, if you see genocide, you cannot do nothing. You cannot do nothing. So what I'm asking you to do is to think about a completely human feeling, thought, system of internalized complicity, and think about how you can reach through that for the people who you know who are not in this room. We need to make this movement huge, and really, we need you to help all of us do it so that none of us are complicit. Just gonna stay here.
Okay, just a couple of notes before we move on to our question and answer portion. There are a number of resources around the room Adam has provided us with. There are QR codes all over the place that have links to more information should you want it. Also, we'd like to remind people in the audience that you can't take photos of other audience members without their consent. So if anyone has done that, please promptly delete them. Okay, so we're going to move on to the questions. These questions are not particularly for any one speaker, so if you want to answer the question, just let us know. So, okay, first question is, what small or large actions can people in places like Picton take to have a tangible impact? here. Who wants to field that one? We're just going to go handheld for the rest.
I just have an example of one. I got it on an email. I'm not a big letter writer, and actually, I don't feel very optimistic about writing letters to members of parliament, even though I do it because I can't not do it. So the concerned congregants of Canada collected more than 1,000 signatures in their open letter to Canadian rabbis. They sent over 100 emails to rabbis directly, letting them know that their communities want them to take a stand for justice and speak out about what is currently happening in Palestine. So religious people, they have what we call in Yiddish schlep in the community. They're seen as important people. The idea of reaching out through the institutions that have either remained silent or who are part of the problem, just being insistent in one way or another. Actually, I don't know if Shahid is here. He walked into there's a very conservative synagogue in Belleville. They're not our friends. Well, he just marched right in there and tried to strike up a conversation. Stuff like that. It's small, but it can be meaningful and can add to our courage.
Our next question is, the situation in Gaza is so urgent, it seems that a lot of actions take a long time to change minds. Time we don't have, time Gazans don't have. What about Labour taking more of an action in shutting Canada down to force change as opposed to actions that really don't materially threaten the rich and powerful? This one's for you, Hassan.
That's the $6 million question that we've been trying to tackle for a while. Labour for Palestine has been in existence since 2006 and a re-establishment since 2017. And our biggest challenge is to move from a lot of symbolic statements and resolutions and positions in support of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, in support of Palestinian people and their liberation and their dignity and their human rights, into something concrete. It takes time, unfortunately. We do have a labor relations regime in the country that sometimes discourages and puts a lot of obstacles in the face of workers to fight for their own rights, let alone when they take action against a genocide or in support of other communities, whether it would be in Canada or outside Canada. So that's something we would definitely like to get to. And the hot cargo campaign that we have is geared towards getting us into that position. We're heading in that direction because this is what is needed. And labor leaders across the country are increasingly saying, enough is enough, we need to do more. Right? And so that is encouraging. And I would also want us to think about the historical example, the struggle against South African apartheid. It took time. It took quite a bit of time. In fact, the labor movement came to join the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, kicking and screaming, because at that time, Nelson Mandela was a terrorist and a communist, right? And they didn't support him. And our government didn't support him. And so it took him a while to break with that. And now we have the label of anti-Semitism that scares a lot of people. Increasingly, they are becoming courageous and bolder in terms of standing up to that label. And so if you are a trade union member, if you're associated with an employee association or a union, speak out. Get in touch with your labor leaders, put pressure on them to do more, because that is, as the question says, that's what's needed.
Thank you, Hassan. Next question is, last week the UN recognized finally that Israel is committing genocide. How do you think this will affect the way our government responds? Do you want to take this one, Adam? Did you hear the question?
Yes, sure. How will it affect how our governments respond? I guess we'll see, but this is definitely going to legitimize the Palestinian struggle and our and the way that has, like, we have, like, the Palestinians have seen this coming from day one, And 6 months into the genocide, we were able to clearly tell through the remarks that Israeli politicians were making, through the intent, right, that it is a genocide. And so this confirmation of it being a genocide, it's definitely helpful to legitimize, the prosecution of Israel and isolating it on the international stage. And it's definitely going to set the ground for the world basically rejecting Zionism and its actions and rejecting the Zionist settler colonial state of Israel. It's going to set the groundwork for it. But I think the matter of the fact is there is a clear disconnect between governmental policies that are being passed and the things that our politicians are saying, whether it's on a federal level, whether it's on a provincial level, whether it's on a municipal level, and what the disconnect between that and what the people are demanding, right? We have to continue to keep that pressure up. I think the UN Council recognized that as a genocide will give us the legal basis to come from a point of strength, right? It will give the advantage that, okay, now it's internationally recognized as a genocide. So people who oppose it, or people who deny it, or people who want to stay silent in the face of genocide, actually have no moral standing in refuting the genocide or refusing to act against it. So will give us, I think, that that structure to really build on it. But the thing is, that takes time. So I think there is no shortcut to do this, and it gives us the framework. And I think the legal structure and I think I want to say to really advance the struggle. But we have to keep the pressure up on all levels to actually be able to pressure the government into changing its response. This recognition of it being a genocide, it's merely symbolic if we're not assuring the governments to actually change its policies and responsibilities.
Thank you, Adam.
Very quick point on that.
Yep.
I want to be optimistic, but this morning an interview aired with the incoming UN ambassador, Canadian UN ambassador David Lametti, who said that Canada needs all evidence assessed before recognizing genocide in Gaza.
Yeah.
So that is on top of the report from the United Nations, on top of the fact that the scholars on genocide came out and said this is a genocide. Canada still needs evidence.
Next question is, what will be done about Israel itself in the event of demilitarization? Neighboring groups with grievances against Israel would likely jump at the opportunity to do the same crimes that Israel is currently committing. Some sort of insurance would be needed. Who wants to field this one?
I can touch on it quickly.
Okay.
So the first part of the question, and it basically puts the responsibility on the Palestinian people to find a solution and to Israel's crime, right? I think what has taken place and what has led us up to this far, nothing justifies it, and I think it kind of assumes that there's it builds on this racist framework of Arabs or Palestinians wanting to destroy or kill Jewish people. It kind of as this by no means calling out a person that wanted to anyway, but there is this inherently I want to say a little bit about assumption and a racist rhetoric that it's saying that assuming that is going to be the response of neighboring countries. And for a matter of fact, we know that Israel has not abided by the laws of war that were established in the Geneva Convention after the Second War. And it's basically where we derive as an international community, as a human beings, as nation state from, and the crimes that Israel has committed. In the 20th century, no one else has committed. I want to say, in terms of the guarantees or on that portion, first of all, there has the problem, the modern day problem with Zionism and modern day Israelis is they absolutely do not want to accept equal rights and for all. That is why they keep pushing people. That's why they push people into Gaza and the West Bank instead of establishing one state, right, for everyone, with equal rights. That is why they're pushing the population of Gaza up to Egypt. That is why they're, annexing the West Bank. And there's a point to be made around like a new constitution. If a new constitution is in place that gives equal rights to all, that represents a true democracy, not an apartheid, not living in a society where two races are treated under two different subclass systems, right? When there's a society that is operating fairly under the principle of everyone's equal, I would argue that there's not going to be a need for every Israeli to leave. I think there is going to be there has to be like a reconciliation, and there has to be a voluntary program to have a lot of these settlers leave, especially the ones with dual citizenships, and returning of the land to the descendants of the refugees from 1948. Anyone who does not accept equal rights for all in a one established state, I think must leave. I think just as a whole, assuming that countries will treat modern-day Israelis the same way Israel has treated Palestinians, it kind of like it ignores that political Zionism as a principle, as an ideology, was built on the principles of settlement, of ethnic cleansing, of just ethnically forcibly displacing the land. That is not the case with any surrounding country.
Thank you, Adam. This is two questions that we're going to combine into one. They're all along the similar lines. Is it unfair to expect all Jewish people to have a stance, and moreover to share that stance with someone they're still getting to know? And what language helps us separate legitimate criticism of Israel's genocidal actions from anti-Semitism, especially given how often the two are deliberately blurred? Who wants to take this one?
No, you're just doing this because I'm Jewish. Listen, folks, we know there's no easy answers. One of the things I learned from all my years of organizing is a struggle. We're figuring things out as we go. We're figuring the conversations out as we go. Repeat the question.
It's two questions. Is it unfair to expect all Jewish people to have a stance, and moreover to share that stance with someone they're still getting to know? And what language helps us separate legitimate criticism of Israel's genocidal actions from anti-Semitism, especially given how often the two are deliberately blurred?
I'm mildly dyslexic, but this question really I find difficult. I always ask permission to have this conversation. Because in fact, if we leap into the conversation with our very strong thoughts and feelings, which are very legitimate and important in the world, and it causes the person we're talking to erect a barrier, it doesn't work. It's not going to go there. I've had friends say to me when they know that my activities in Belleville and making the film, and when they ask me what I'm doing and I tell them, they say, we're not going to talk about that. Well, there's not a lot of way around that unless an opportunity is there. That's the same in any difficult question. And the thing about equating criticism of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism makes me crazy. It enrages me because it's such a constructed barrier. Because that we're Jewish, we have every right to criticize what the state of Israel is doing. The state of Israel is now a theocracy. We have the right to challenge it. We say not in our name, but we really mean it. And we can't allow ourselves to be complicit in the injustice because of that completely disgusting equation. Other than that, I'm sorry, I obviously have thoughts and feelings about that, right? Just let me add something before I pass the mic on. Just to give you a sense of creating the opportunity for conversation in a thoughtful and gentle way. So we did this screening in Belleville, and there was 3 of us Jewish people in the audience, and one woman who actually is from the region, she said, she's Jewish, she said, if my father knew I was here, he would disown me. I assumed that he was dead. He would disown me. She was so upset. And I said, I'm really proud of this. I said, yes, he might disown you, but we will re-own you. It's the creation of a community. It's the creation of a community committed to justice and acting in justice with pride.
Next question. It was stated by the speaker that it has been 715 days since the beginning of the war, which we all know was started by the gruesome attack against Israeli civilians on October 7th. Why are you not calling out the genocide perpetrated by Hamas/Palestine when they have clearly stated that their objective is the massacre of all Jews and Israelis? Hassan, I think you were going to take this one.
Yeah.
I guess the last part of the question is factually incorrect, right? And that is whoever asked the question, with all due respect, they're reading from the script and the narrative of the Zionist state. So that is not factual, and no statement from any of the resistance movements in Palestine have said that their intention on October 7 or any other time was to kill Jews. After all, Palestinians didn't choose their colonizers. It's not like they went around the world and said, oh, okay, because we hate Jews, let's get the Jews to come and colonize us so we can kill them. That didn't happen. That's not the case. So that's the first part of the question, is, sorry to say, but somewhat of a Zionist talking points. As for the first part of the question, why aren't we talking about it? Well, you know, in beginning of 1943, there was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which is the greatest, in my opinion, symbolism of resistance of a people against oppression, against the Nazis. By that same logic of that question, it's like saying that the Nazis committed the Holocaust because Jews fought against them and resisted their oppression, right? So you cannot talk about October 7 without talking about what Adham spoke about earlier, 78 years of dispossession, of war crimes, of ethnic cleansing, of unspeakable horrors and atrocities, and a litany of massacres. That's what happened up to October 7th. And so if you want to fixate on that, you are missing the whole point about why October 7 happened in the first place, let alone the fact that if we want to talk about October 7, we need to come to grips with a lot of the hoaxes and the disinformation about what took place on that particular day, which have been dispelled greatly by a lot of people over the past 2 years, which we're not going to get to now, but I'll be happy to talk about later if need be.
Can I add something very brief?
Of course.
Yeah, just like the first thing I want to say is like, you cannot commit a crime and go around and say, I have the right to defend myself. That is not how international law works. That's not how human norms work. You cannot go and kill someone's family, and then when they attack back and they hurt your family, say, okay, I have the right to defend myself, and everything I do afterwards justifies whatever I did. So you cannot come from an illegal and immoral right to act in the name of an immoral right, right? You can't come from like a place of wrong to make a right. That's just not, like, it doesn't make sense. So just absolutely ludicrous. That's number one. Number two, I'll say this, none of us, we're here to support the Palestinian struggle and defend Palestinian human rights to exist, to self-determination, to sovereignty, right? Those are basic rights that any person, any people should have. So none of us is here defending Hamas or a spokesman for Hamas. This is not the case. But what I want to say is, there is a 15-page document that was put out by Hamas. It's called Al-Aqsa Flood, Our Narrative. It's a 14-page document that explains, that lays out every single reason why they did October 7th and why they did Al-Aqsa Flood. And if you are going to be indoctrinated, and if you're going to be brainwashed, this idea of this terrorist organization that came out of nowhere and beheaded babies and burned babies in ovens, everything that's been debunked about October 7th, and you're going to believe all those lines and be indoctrinated into it, then you're just choosing to believe what's wrong. You are choosing that. You are choosing to justify what's been happening in response to it, and choosing that to justify what took October 7th, which again comes from an illegal law. So people, that's why I started with the historical context, because I wanted to make sure that October 7th, people understand that October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. We had a lot of questions, but we've run out of time, and we want to thank our speakers. We want to thank all of you for coming. We want to thank the volunteer committee who put this together. We encourage you to check out the action table, return the signed letter. You can sign up for future events over at our sign-in table and at the action table. This event has been entirely funded by community members and sponsors, and we're actually running it at a deficit. So we are accepting donations at the registration table, and we have a refreshment table at the back. Refreshments are free. There's tea, there's cookies, there's baklava. All we ask is a small donation, and we thank you again all for coming. Thank you, Adam. Credit and volunteer? How do you do that? They can show this guy, they can next guy. I don't remember all of their names. There's 15 people here, right? 19. I don't know everybody's name.
For what?
Let's thank all the volunteers by name.
Oh, no. Just say thank you, volunteers.
I did.
One thing I'm going to suggest is if we just ask them to stare at the chairs, so they can stand around the table as well.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, your computer.
The last thing I want to right back another 3 hours, right?
You know what was really nice? I don't know if you realize this, but having the text of your speech on screen,
Yeah.
very good for people who are hearing impaired.
Oh, really? Were they?
My wife is deaf, so
Okay.
she was reading your script as you were going.
Oh,
and
nice.
found it very helpful.
Okay, so she was able to read it?
Yeah, no, it was great.
Oh, awesome.
I watched her read it. And I
She was
did-
close, I guess. Awesome, that's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Um, so So it's better that I was unable to print it.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. And the graphics were good because it helped illustrate what it was.
That's right, yes, yeah, no, definitely. This is a great show.
Yeah, no, I'm really
I
happy.
mean, sometimes we have a hard time getting people out this many holidays.